Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Comprehensive D&D 5e Guides. Um, I had somebody on Facebook in one of the groups that I frequent that I can't actually remember which one right now. But somebody asked specifically about rogues and which archetype they should choose. And I gave a really simple like one paragraph description of kind of the basis of each archetype and an example of a character that would kind of fit that archetype from pop culture, so that they could go, if you want to play, a like for the assassin, I say pick any protagonist from the Assassin's Creed franchise. They're assassins. If you want to be that kind of cool Ezio Auditore, uh, killer kind of thing, the assassin fits that really well. And So anyway, I mentioned that I do videos like this, and I hadn't done one in a little while, and I figured I'm making my way through the player's handbook, and rogues probably are not a bad place to go next. I have a really interesting relationship with rogues in general from a DM standpoint, because rogues are most often the characters that I see min-maxers choose, which if you're not familiar with that term, that's basically someone who is playing D&D to win, basically. They will completely ignore the story aspect of D&D, and they will do whatever they can to make the most powerful character they can. These are the kind of people that you will see them taking multi-classes. Like, this is a very common min-maxer technique that I've seen used. What they'll do, and I think I mentioned in the monk videos, what they'll do is they'll take monk and they'll go way of shadow. And one of the things you can do as a shadow monk is you can cast the darkness spell using key points, which is really useful because you get tons of them, and it only costs 2. You get tons of them as you get to higher levels. The way darkness works is you actually cast it on an object, not an area. So what happens is if that object moves, the darkness moves with it. However, normal dark vision doesn't work in a darkness spell. You need to have what's called magical dark vision, or something else. Something like blind sight wouldn't be affected by the darkness spell, or tremor sense, things like that, or true sight. No, another one that is not affected by that. So what I saw a lot of min-maxers doing was they would make a Way of the Shadow Monk, because they're awesome, and then they would dip 2 levels into Warlock. That's a weird combination in general, because monks are all about, self-control, and from a story perspective, monks are all about self-control and honing their body as a weapon and as a tool, and understanding how everything works. And warlocks are people that are so desperate for power that they will make a pact with a creature they don't fully understand, just so they can get power. The reason they would do that is at 2nd level, warlocks get what are called eldritch invocations, and one of the invocations they can get is called Devil's Sight, which lets you see in magic darkness. So what they would do is they would use this combination of Devil's Sight, which is always on, you don't have to activate it, and the darkness spell to cast the darkness spell on like a pebble or something, pick up the pebble. As long as it's not completely encased, the darkness wraps around corners and everything. So they just have to hold the pebble in one hand and then go around, and they're effectively invisible. Nothing has line of sight on them. They have advantage in all their attack rolls. Again, it's a very min-maxer kind of thing. They're worrying entirely about mechanics and not worrying about the story and the thought behind it. And they're really kind of ignoring the purpose of the class as well. This whole series could be construed as like a min-maxing guide, and that's never what I intended it for. It's mostly to kind of show the thought behind the classes and how they're designed to work, not so much to give you the absolute best min-maxing strategies ever, though I think I've made at least one video like that. So anyway, going back to rogues, rogues are very common for min-maxers to use because their basic kind of combat rotation is find a way to get sneak attack, do crap tons of damage, bonus action hide. It's a very simple mechanic, and it's remarkably effective. The other thing that's nice about them is one of the things we'll talk about once I get into the class. They have this thing called expertise, which means they get to add double their proficiency bonus to eventually I think it's like 4 different skills. So they very rarely fail certain checks. Whatever they're super good at, they're massively good at. And generally, it's stealth and thieves' tools are the ones that they will do the most on because they use those so much. And that's where I kind of have issues with rogues because they're a very well designed class, but they're just this shy of being broken because of the crazy amount of burst damage they can get, because of how easy it is for them to get sneak attack, which is one of the reasons why I will rule kind of hard on rogues when they're trying to kind of abuse the system, like abusing the hide action. I'll talk about that in a little bit. In order to get advantage on all their attack rolls. You don't need advantage on every single attack roll that you make, there's so many other ways for you to get sneak attack that you don't need advantage for it. Anyway, so I'm going to talk about just the rogue itself. I will do the archetypes another one because the rogue, as much as again it's the weapon of choice for a lot of min-maxers because it's a relatively simple and it's relatively easy to create a really powerful character out of this without having to do too much. They really only need one stat, which is dexterity. That's all they really need, and wisdom is relatively useful. Wisdom or intelligence, depending on what you're doing, because intelligence you'll use to investigate, which is what you use to find traps. Perception you'll use for just about everything else, and some DMs will actually let you use it to find traps as well, depending on the trap. But really, Dex is all you need. You could literally have 8s and everything else, and you'd still be able to do everything a rogue is supposed to do pretty well. So let's start off. First level, they get that expertise. I mentioned it before. At first level, they choose 2 skills that they're proficient in. So they used to call it trained, now they call it proficient, but it's when you pick the class, you get to choose 4 skills to be proficient in. And you also are proficient in thieves' tools. So expertise lets you choose 2 of those or 1 skill and your thieves' tools. You basically treat thieves' tools as an additional skill. So whenever you make a thieves' tools check, it's a dexterity check, And if you're proficient in it, you add your proficiency bonus. If you have expertise in it, you add double your proficiency bonus. At low levels, this isn't that big a deal because proficiency bonus is 2. So you go from, an additional 2 to additional 4. But when you get to higher levels where you have a proficiency bonus of 4 or 5, you now have a plus 10, plus generally all the skills that they're going to be using are going to be dex based. So you already have a plus 4 or 5. So you can have a plus 15 or a plus, I think max 12 and 5. Max you have a plus 18 to your roll. Which means if you roll a 2, you're getting a 20, which is generally a pretty high roll in anything. So that's how rogues are just that slight bit off of broken. Choosing the right skills for your expertise is important, and think about how you want the character to play. Do you want them to be the super stealthy kind of thing? Do you want them to be kind of, the guy with sticky fingers that's always going out and just, anytime he brushes past someone, he has something new that he just happened to pick up. Doesn't know where from. Stealth is going to be for the super sneaky. Sleight of hand is going to be for the one that has sticky fingers. If you wanted to be the dude that's like running across ropes and scaling surfaces and stuff like that, acrobatics might be useful. I don't think they have athletics as a class one. Well, you can. So if you want to be someone that's like always climbing up walls and things like that, you use athletics for that. So picking those 2 skills at level 1 is really going to start defining how the character works. And then Thieves' Tools, again, opens locks, disarms traps, all those cool thiefy type things, you use Thieves' Tools for them. As you get higher, once you hit 6th level, you get 2 more. So you get a grand total of 4 skills that you gain expertise in, which gives you a lot of really, really good skills. That's one of the things that rogues are best at. Out of combat, they are the skills check masters. And when you combine it with a background, like if you want to be an incredibly persuasive rogue, you can just, again, you only need the dex for most of your abilities. So you can also give yourself a high charisma and then choose a background that lets you choose be trained in like persuasion or deception or something like that, and then use expertise on that, and suddenly you're one of those super liars that almost nobody can catch. Things like that, again, so that's expertise is really, really great at helping to define your rogue right from level 1. Sneak attack is the other thing you get at level 1. It's the rogue's bread and butter in combat. You don't get extra attacks. You can dual wield, but the rogue actually has a specific use for their bonus action that no other class gets that really defines them. There's not a ton of rogues that do a lot of dual wielding, mostly because they don't do a ton of damage when they dual wield. They only need to hit once with their sneak attack to get it, and you're only allowed once per turn to use your sneak attack. Now again, I said turn, not round. So you can actually sneak attack on an opportunity attack if the conditions are met. You can sneak attack if somebody else gives you an attack using one of their abilities, as long as it's not on the same turn that you did it. So yeah, there's ways around it, but that's the rogue's bread and butter. It starts off, you just get an extra d6 of damage, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. The other thing that's nice is because it's a die and it's not like a flat addition like the rage mechanic for barbarians. When you crit as a rogue, you roll double the number of dice that you would if you just regularly hit, and that includes sneak attack dice. So rogues that crit one-shot monsters, and it's one of the reasons why I tend when I'm running a game with a rogue in it, I tend to be really careful about when I allow sneak attack and when I don't. If I think they're abusing the rules or things like that, or they're trying to read rules a certain way to make it that much easier for them to get sneak attack, I'm probably going to rule against them. Simply because it's like, no, you already have like 7 different ways to get sneak attack in this particular instance. You don't need an 8th. So that sneak attack, that is the, that's kind of the defining feature of the rogue in combat, is that sneak attack, and then something they'll get at level 2, which we'll talk about in a second. The next thing that they get, and this is, I think, something that most rogues and definitely most min-maxers just completely forget about. They don't even realize they have this ability, and I think it's one of the coolest abilities. I think from a role-playing perspective, it is a definitive rogue thing. This is something that only rogues can do. You cannot get this any other way other than being a rogue. Is they have their own language called Thieves' Cant. And the interesting thing about it is Thieves' Cant works 2 different ways. One, you can have a conversation, but by using Thieves' Cant, you can use certain words and certain phrases that someone else that also understands Thieves' Cant will be able to understand that you're saying something completely different than the actual conversation you're having. There was a mini series on Sci-Fi back in like 2000 where they adapted the book Dune by Frank Herbert. And there's this really interesting scene where 2 Bene Gesserit are talking, and you see subtitles underneath the conversation because they're using basically Thieves' Cant. The audio actually dips down, so you can't really hear their conversation that well. Like, if you listen closely, you can still listen to them talking, and what they're talking about seems benign. They're talking about just normal, everyday gossip and, oh, how are you doing and everything like that. But you see, because of how they're moving their hands and things like that, that they're having a completely different conversation. And so it's a way that you can have an undetectable conversation with another rogue. And it's an incredibly cool thing from a role-playing perspective, from a mechanics perspective. If you have another rogue in the party, you can have conversations with them that no one else can understand. Again, Thieves' Cant is treated as a language, but it is treated, it is the only way to learn it is to be a rogue. You have to be a rogue to do it. And that's also true if you make rogue allies. If you have a thieves guild that you're dealing with, they are going to be able to do that too. So you can have conversations with NPCs that it is impossible for anyone other than a rogue to be able to understand what you're saying. Now, it does say in here that a message takes 4 times as long to convey in spoken quote-unquote Thieves' Cant than a regular message, because again, you have to choose your words carefully, and sometimes it's hand signals and sometimes it's just looking different places. But just how cool is that you have this own language? The other thing is certain hand signs and things like that again, only other rogues know, that'll tell you things like, hey, the guards are around here, or certain symbols that'll go, hey, this is a safe haven. This is, you have a connection to the underworld that no one else, not only does no one else have, no one else can even understand without being a rogue. It's also another fun thing, if you have a rogue in the party and you're a DM, and they use Thieves' Cant a lot, it's actually nice to put an NPC in there that looks very upstanding, that has a dark past, that you can just kind of write in that they have a level of rogue so that they can understand Thieves' Cant. And that's a really, really interesting role-playing perspective when the thief is conversing with another thief, thinking that they're speaking an unbreakable code. And one of the people that looks to be far too upstanding to know what this is can read and understand the code that they're that they're using, and can either confront the party about it. They can just take steps to make sure whatever the plan was going to happen doesn't happen. They could decide to try and help. But it's this really interesting thing that I think a lot of people ignore about the rogue, and it's one of my favorite aspects of it. At second level, you get the other defining feature of the rogue, which is what's called cunning action. Cunning action means you can use your bonus action to do extra things. With just the regular rogue, without any of the archetypes, you can use your cunning action to take the dash, the disengage, or the hide action. All three of these things normally take your action to take. A rogue can do it as a bonus action. Now, if you're dual wielding, your bonus action is used to make an offhand attack. So it's one of the reasons where you don't see a ton of rogue dual wielding. There is an archetype, it's not in the PHB, that is specifically built for rogues that want to dual wield and be really cool, kind of swashbucklery kind of things. It's remarkably enough called the swashbuckler. But for the most part, bonus action is super, super important to the rogue. And each archetype is actually going to add more things to what that cunning action can be used for. So again, it's a defining feature of the rogue is this cunning action. And it really changes how the rogue plays. So dash is very simple. It means you get to move. You get to take a move action again. So rogue, that means they can travel faster than anyone. That means they can run into or out of combat faster than anyone else because their bonus action acts like a move action if they want it to. Disengage just means that you don't get opportunity attacks except in some very specific situations. So that means that a rogue can kind of run into combat, attack, and then disengage so that they can't get hurt, or at least the person has to run towards them in order to do it, which they could set up other things to make running towards them not as preferable. Anything from just running up to someone who's already engaged with an ally, doing a crap ton of damage because of that sneak attack, and then running away, or running up to someone, attacking them, disengaging with your bonus action, using the rest of your move to go back, and having your party already have a trap set, and you're just waiting for the person to come and trigger your trap. All these very, very effective moves. And then the one that min-maxers use all the time, and it's super, super boring, is a hide action. And it's actually a very useful thing. It's a very rogue thing to do from the design standpoint of it. But a lot of people don't understand what hiding means in D&D. If you are hidden, basically it means they don't have line of sight on you. And in order to hide, you have to have something to hide behind. And one of the things I think Crawford has mentioned this is hide doesn't mean they can't see you. It means they can't see you well. You're difficult to see, which will impose disadvantage on their attack rolls or break line of sight, things like that. So that's what the hide action does. What it does not do is turn you invisible. And that's what a lot of rogues think, is they'll sit there and they'll duck behind a corner, go, well, I'm going to take the hide action. I'm like, okay, they can't see you right now. So the hide action would also include like making noise and stuff like that. So I'm like, go ahead, roll your stealth check. The way a hide action works is your stealth check is based on either their passive or active perception. Generally in combat, I will make perception rolls. I won't use passive perception because they are actively looking for bad guys. And as long as your stealth is higher than their perception, they don't notice you. They, and then I see a lot of min-maxers go, okay, then I'm going to run out and do this. The second you're out of cover, you are no longer hidden. You're not invisible. You are simply putting something in between yourself so they can't see you. The other thing that I saw so often, and I used to get rogues really, really mad at me, because if you read the PHB a certain way and misinterpret things a certain way, this seems foolproof. What it would be is Rogues would be light. They choose the Lightfoot Halfling race, and one of the things a Lightfoot Halfling can do is they're considered small instead of medium creatures, and they can hide behind a medium creature, or they can be considered small creatures. So what that means is, I used to see this all the time. They would take the Lightfoot Halfling roll. They'd use a hand crossbow. And what they would do is they would have like a barbarian or something go up and attack somebody. They'd go right behind the barbarian, so they're 10 feet away from the bad guy. They would use their bonus action to hide because they do have cover. So technically, the hide action does work because they have something to attempt to hide behind. And then they would go, okay, I'm hidden. That means he can't see me. That means I have advantage on the attack roll. And then I get my sneak attack damage. And what they would do is they would do what I call peekaboo. Peekaboo. So what they would do is just every turn they would use their bonus action to hide behind the barbarian and would just lean him out and peekaboo and shoot him with the crossbow. And I will let that happen once. Because, and this is how I'll always explain to them. The first time, they're probably not going to expect it. You're small. They have a huge barbarian in front of them that's swinging and stuff. They're going to lose track of you once. So I'm absolutely fine if you do that once. However, if you stay in the exact same place as you were before, you hide, you may break line of sight with them so that they can't see you, but they can go around and find you because they have this nifty thing called object permanence. Object permanence is the idea that just because you can't see something doesn't mean it blinks out of existence. It's something that when we're super, super young, like babies do not have object permanence. That's why peekaboo is such a fun game for them, because as soon as your face disappears, it doesn't exist to them anymore. However, I don't know exactly when object permanence, as far as child development is concerned, when it becomes a thing. But I know by age 2, most children have object permanence. So if a 2-year-old has object permanence, you can be fairly certain that a person that lives in a world where they live or die based on their ability to defend themselves with a weapon, and they have been in many, many battles before, is going to have object permanence. And if they get shot by something that a sneak attack basically means you hit something vital, they get shot by something that hurts super, super bad, they're going to remember it. And they're going to remember, hey, there's a dude behind this guy that's going to peek out and he's going to shoot me. So I would tell them that works once, and then I'd go, object permanence. He doesn't think you're not there. And a lot of times I would have them just circle around and attack the rogue directly. Simply because while the barbarian is big and hulky, the guy that's shooting them and causing them to bleed out profusely is a bigger threat. And basic threat assessment is kind of necessary in a battlefield. So that's my one issue with the hide action. Other than that, again, it's a very roguey thing to do. Just don't abuse it. Don't make your DM go, no. Again, like these people doing the peekaboo thing, they already get sneak attack because their barbarian friend is right next to the bad guy. They don't need advantage on every single roll. It's again, it's just abusing the system. It's min-maxing. It's boring. Be creative. All right, so 3rd level, you choose an archetype. Not going through those today. 4th level, you get your ability score improvement, which could be feats as well. There's a lot of feats that work really well with rogues. Defensive Duelist is one of the ones that I think is underutilized a lot. It basically means if you're holding a finesse weapon, which you technically, if you're a melee rogue, sneak attack has to be done with a finesse weapon. So it lets you use your reaction to add your proficiency bonus to your AC. So really, really useful, and it makes rogues that much harder to hit. So there's a bunch of other ones that are really useful as well. I'm not going to go into all of them, but yeah. And then obviously max out your dex as soon as you can. That is your bread and butter. At 5th level, you get the other ability that is really, really useful as a rogue, and that's Uncanny Dodge. What it is if an attacker hits you with an attack, and you can see the attacker, I think, yeah. When an attacker you can see hits you with an attack, you can use your reaction to halve the damage. This is massively useful. Rogues don't have a massive number of hit points. They generally don't have massive ACs, though with high dex and good armor, you can get pretty good ACs, especially that defensive duelist. But things like spells and stuff like that, where they're making saves, they can take a lot of damage. And Uncanny Dodge, it uses the reaction, so they can only use it once per round, because you only get one reaction per round, not per turn. But having the damage of a really bad attack, like if somebody crits you, having that in your back pocket is astoundingly useful. At 7th level, they get Evasion. Evasion, I think, is one of the best abilities in the game, and it's not exclusive to rogues. Rangers get it at a much higher level. Monks get it at a higher level. But what it is any dex-based saving throw you make, which is a large majority of spell attacks, a large majority of area attacks are dex saves. As long as you can see the attack, and it's a dex-based saving throw, you actually can instead of taking half damage if you save and full damage if you fail, you take no damage if you save and half damage if you fail. This makes rogues incredibly good at fighting spellcasters, at fighting. Dragons are actually really good at too, because if the dragon's breath weapon is a dex-based thing, anything that uses dex-based saving throws, they are super good at, because they can technically be immune to it. And then if you combine that with Uncanny Dodge, if you fail, like you're having and doing really, really well for yourself, it makes rogues very, very difficult to kill. And again, the entire purpose of the rogue is do enough damage to kill a guy off before they can kill you. They tend to be a little bit squishy, and these things here really make up for that. Reliable talent is the other thing that, again, just that hair off of broken. Basically, any skill you're proficient with. Whenever you make an ability check that lets you add your proficiency bonus, so literally any skill you're proficient in, anything you're trained in, anything a 9 or lower you treat as a 10. So that means you can't roll less than a 10 on anything you're trained in. Which generally means, again, when you combine that with expertise, that means the lowest for a rogue with 20 dex with a +4 proficiency bonus, which you get at, I think, at level 11, somewhere around there. Anyway, +4 is not a massive proficiency bonus. Would mean that the lowest they can roll, if they're trained in stealth and have expertise in stealth, the lowest they can roll is 8 and 5 is 13, plus 10 is 23. They can never roll lower than a 23. And this is what upsets some dungeon masters, because rogues, that means if they're trained in perception, with expertise in perception, again, they're never missing. Or they're trained in expertise in investigation. That means that they're never missing a trap. This is that thing. And again, it's that thing that makes expertise even more useful. And it's going to further define the rogue. It's just that person that can do a few things so much better than anyone else. So that's that thing. Again, it's one of my reasons why I argue that rogues are just that hair off of being broken. So yeah. The next thing they get at 14th level, they get what's called Blind Sense. Basically, as long as they can hear, you're aware of the location of any hidden or invisible creatures within 10 feet of you. Basically, invisibility or hidden creatures don't count within 10 feet of you. That also means the darkness spell does not affect you as long as you're within 10 feet of a bad guy. You still, the darkness spell is still going to prevent you from seeing, but bad guys won't be able to sneak up on you and things like that. You will be able to tell just from hearing. Incredibly useful. Again, it's really, really great for sneaky rogues. It's really, really great because as you get to higher levels, you start dealing with enemies that can cast invisibility. You start dealing with enemies that can cast blindness, things like that. Yeah, this basically gives them the ability to see invisible creatures, which is not something any class has built into a skill. There are built into a class feature. There's a number of spells that give you that ability, and I think there might be some other things that you can choose that will help you with that. But for the most part, this is a uniquely rogue thing. They can see invisible things. Super useful. Slippery Mind basically means you have proficiency in wisdom saves. Wisdom saves are the ones that basically mind control are wisdom saves. And anything to do, charm is always wisdom saves, stuff like that. A really effective tactic when you're a dungeon master, you want to challenge a party, is to mind control a member of the party. I generally tend to pick whoever does the most, is either the hardest to kill or whoever does the most damage. Mind controlling a rogue is devastating for a party because all those things that make them just a hair off of broken are now being used against them. 15th level makes it that much more difficult for them to be mind controlled or charmed or anything like that. And again, really kind of feeds into the idea that rogues are these very street smart, very, very worldly type people. And so that Slippery Mind, they've seen so much that it's really hard to pull the wool over their eyes now. They even illusions and things like that make them, that look real. They're automatically going to doubt because of what they've seen in their life, because of the fact that they know that a conversation between two people that sounds completely innocuous could be a completely different conversation. That idea, that thieves' cant idea, going all the way to 15th level eventually turns them into kind of skeptics of everything. And it's very hard to trick them and very hard to kind of control them and make them see things or do things that they don't want to do. So very, very cool there. Elusive, this again, it's an 18th level ability. 18th level abilities are powerful. They're supposed to be. But this one is just massively cool. Basically, you're so evasive, you can, as long as you are not incapacitated, they can never have advantage against you. If you're blind, deaf, restrained, because restrained is not incapacitated, they don't get they don't get advantage against you. It's a massively useful thing. Advantage is 5th edition's answer to all the complexity that started coming up in 3rd edition and 4th edition, and when you look at a lot of other role-playing games that started coming out, they just had all these rules about everything, and advantage is the answer to that. The advantage-disadvantage system was designed to simplify the game so that you could get to what you really wanted to do, which was tell really cool stories and do really cool things with your characters. So getting advantage is a big deal. You have twice as likely a chance of rolling a crit. you are twice less likely to roll a critical fail because you take the higher of the two rolls. Like it's an amazing thing. The fact that rogues are now immune to crits or immune to advantage is phenomenal. Again, it's another thing that rogues again are a little bit squishy. They're difficult. They do a lot of damage with their kind of glass cannons. This is another thing that's designed to make it that much easier for you to play that really aggressive rogue where you're running in and out of combat and doing all these crazy, awesome rogue-y things. You never have to worry about getting it. Never have to worry about getting someone getting advantage on an attack roll against you. So. And then 20th level is, again, 20th level abilities should be massively broken. By the time you get to 20th level, you are basically gods, to take a quote from Critical Role. Poor Goldfish. The 20th level abilities are supposed to be kind of broken. They're supposed to be major, major things. Stroke of Luck is the 20th level rogue ability. It is exactly that. Basically... if your attack misses a target within range, you can just turn the miss into a hit. You just get to decide, no, I hit. Doesn't matter, I hit. If you fail an ability check, you can choose to treat the die roll as a nat 20 for that ability check. Because ability checks don't automatically succeed if you roll a nat 20. But it means you treat it as the highest total you could have possibly gotten. That's a really big thing. If you've got a super slippery bad guy that nobody else can hit, you can go in and, in the perfect instance, you miss. You're like, no, I'm going to hit. You're going to get that sneak attack damage that you want. You're going to do crazy amounts of damage. Or one of those instances where... a save or die moment, like they cast Finger of Death on you, or Disintegrate or something like that, where if you don't save, your character is over. With this, you can just go, no, I succeed, or it's ability checks. That doesn't technically count for saving throws. But other things like you're trying to stealthily get into somewhere, or you're trying to do something that you're not trained in. Very, very useful. The only limitation is you can only do it once per short or long rest, but that's still a lot of use, and makes the rogue a very, very dangerous thing. In general, you don't generally see people playing level 20 characters. They just don't get that high. But in general, from my own point of view, Stroke of Luck, I would probably see rogues using it a lot more to make an attack hit than I would see them doing it on ability checks, because they already have expertise and reliable talent and all these other things to make it so they're very rarely going to fail ability checks. But that auto hit, super, super useful, especially that clutch moment where the bad guy is just teetering on oblivion and you've got to kill him right then, or something really, really bad is going to happen. The fact that the rogue can come up, take a swing, and he goes, oh, well, I'm going to impose disadvantage on you. And disadvantage means they don't get their sneak attack or anything like that. And because the disadvantage they miss, you can go, no, I'm going to hit there and just do that last bit of damage that you need. Or they're mind controlling someone that you need to get them to stop mind controlling, and you miss, they hit, and you go, nope, it's a hit. It forces them to make a concentration check, which they fail, and you get your party member back. Stuff like that. Really, really useful. So that is the rogue. Again, the kind of basics of the rogue are expertise, super good at ability checks. In general, they're really, really good at what they do. Don't underestimate Thieves' Cant. It's the coolest part of the class. And then sneak attack and cunning action. are really what define the rogue. I'll make another video later when I can handle it, talking about the PHB subclasses for the rogue and how they kind of fit into the overall rogue design. But yeah, that's the rogue. If you guys have any questions or comments or anything, like I said, put them in the comments below. If you have a class that you want me to cover in this, and they don't have to be from the player's handbook or anything like that. If you have, something on the DM's Guild, you're like, hey, can you look over this class? Tell me, mechanically how it works. Tell me what you see as the design behind it and stuff like that. Yeah, I'm more than happy to do that. If you've created a class that you've published on the DM's Guild and you want me to do a video like this for it, as long as I can get access to the class, give me a copy of the class. You can gift them through the DM's Guild. I'll do that. Or again, if you guys want me to go over something like Matt Mercer's Blood Hunter class or stuff like that, whatever you guys are interested in, let me know in the comments, and I'll plan accordingly, because these have been some of my most popular videos, and they've inspired the most discussions. So obviously this is what you guys enjoy, and I enjoy doing it when I can. So anyway, that's all for me today, and I will see you guys next time. All right, bye-bye.